Everyone. So Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns are very likely going to come to some sort of agreement on a waiver or buyout, whether the Phoenix Suns decide to stretch him or they end up just waiving him and then he goes and signs elsewhere. There's even reports and talks about maybe Chris Paul taking lesser money to stay with the Phoenix Suns. But even then, it's like, if you're going to take less money, you might as well go to the team that you want to go to, unless Phoenix really is the team you want to be at. And then on the other side, you have the Philadelphia 76ers with James Harden. And there's a lot of questions about what is going to happen with James Harden. Tons of reports have came out that James Harden wants to go to the Houston Rockets, that the Houston Rockets want James Harden, that James Harden is torn between the Sixers and the Rockets, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. If James Harden really wants to win, which he has expressed on numerous occasions, that yes, he wants to win an NBA championship, why would you go to Houston of all places unless you're trying to, I don't know, convince Houston to trade all the young assets to then go and acquire enough talent for you to win a chip? But if that's the case, you might as well just stay in Philly. You got Daryl Morey, who's willing to go all in and do whatever it takes to try to bring a title to Philly. You got one of the best players in the league, the MVP, and Joel Embiid. Tyrese Maxey's kind of coming into his own. Like, I just feel like Philly was right there. You make an adjustment or two, and you might end up being in the NBA Finals and potentially winning an NBA championship next year. Phoenix, they really need to build depth. That's the problem. I was saying for like a month now that Chris Paul is very likely going to end up being waived or bought out or traded. When Kevin Durant went to the Phoenix Suns, I actually brought that up and talked about it because it's the only real way for them to build a talented enough roster to win an NBA championship with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Now, obviously, some things, some circumstances and stuff could end up falling in line and they end up winning an NBA championship. It's possible. We've seen teams with even less talent win an NBA championship before. And this Phoenix Suns would still have Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. So they do have talent, but you need more than that. You need defense, you need depth, you need coaching, you need... there's a lot of factors that go into an NBA championship level team. And so the Phoenix Suns very likely are going to trade DeAndre Ayton and look to move Chris Paul. But reports are coming out that both teams that are kind of in the same circumstances, the Phoenix Suns and the Philadelphia 76ers, may end up just swapping their point guards, sending James Harden to the Phoenix Suns and then Chris Paul to the Sixers. Based on reports, potential Harden CP3 trade, rumor of a Paul for Harden sign and trade deal have been quietly circulating in the past month. Now, we'll dive into the James Harden part of this first. For James Harden, it makes sense, right? You get to go back and play with Kevin Durant. You get to join a contending team that could be enough to win an NBA championship. The issue is you're probably still in a lot of the same position. Now, you could trade DeAndre Ayton to go get the depth pieces you need. So if you could get James Harden, like, why not? James Harden, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker would be one of the best three players in the league together. They just got to kind of round out the roster at that point, and you very well could be right there for an NBA championship. But the kind of con to this whole thing is James Harden disappears in the playoffs, is terrible at times. He did have some really good games for Philadelphia. I mean, he did single-handedly pretty much win a game for Philadelphia. They also... with James Harden kind of being the third guy, then that allows him to not have that pressure. So that could be good for James Harden. It could also be good for the Phoenix Suns, where he doesn't really have to be a 30-point-a-game scorer. Even if he does disappear, he still has the ability to play make and get other guys going, get to the foul line, stuff like that. So gives you a little more versatility, I guess. Also a little more size, though James Harden isn't a good defender by any means, so you're still going to be terrible defensively. But also, it would hard cap the Phoenix Suns, which they're already in trouble with the cap situation, and a hard cap would make things worse unless James Harden is willing to take a significant pay cut. He did take a bit of a pay cut for the Philadelphia 76ers, so that way they could go get PJ Tucker. So, would he be willing to take an even bigger pay cut to end up going to the Phoenix Suns and playing with Kevin Durant. The whole reason that he left the Brooklyn Nets was not because of Kevin Durant. He loved playing with Kevin Durant. It was the Kyrie situation and everything and the way that the organization was being ran. He just wanted out at that point, and that's why he ended up going to the Sixers. So maybe he's willing to give it another chance with Kevin Durant. Does Kevin Durant want that? You'd have essentially James Harden be the point guard, Devin Booker be the shooting guard, and then Kevin Durant being the small forward. But the thing is, and the reason they don't really need Chris Paul is the ball is best suited in Kevin Durant and Devin Booker's hands, right? You don't need a point guard that can deliver 10 assists a game, right? Like James Harden, he can definitely play make. He can definitely set guys up and do a lot of things on just orchestrating the offense, but you don't really need that, right? I mean, you have two of the best scorers in the entire league. You need a point guard that can bring the ball up without turning it over, set Kevin Durant and Devin Booker up, and then play some defense and hit open shots. Now, James Harden, the only thing he really checks off is the maybe hitting open shots, right? Like, again, you don't need him to be slicing and dicing and trying to get Kevin Durant and Devin Booker open. Like, again, you need somebody that can play some solid defense, can lock down. Like, a Marcus Smart would be perfect for the Phoenix Suns, right? A guy that can just bring the ball up, is going to play hard, going to play defense. I think James Harden isn't really the answer. Now, granted, obviously, like if Devin Booker is having a bad game, you got James Harden who can go and get you 30, right? If Kevin Durant's having a bad game, James Harden can go and get you 30. That helps. That's nice, right? How do you defend all three of those guys on the defensive end would make it really tough. Offensively, you'd be great. There's no doubt about it. But we've seen James Harden completely disappear. We've seen James Harden's lack of just consistency, especially come the playoffs. He was really good in the regular season, but again, the playoff thing came up. Yes, James Harden would be the third option on the Phoenix Suns, but I don't think James Harden's the answer. I think they need to get rid of Chris Paul and actually start getting some depth, getting some talent around Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, especially with the new CBA. And then on top of that, you're also going to be hard. I just think it would end up being a disaster for the Phoenix Suns. I really do. But from a Philadelphia standpoint, you got to get more than just Chris Paul, obviously, because Chris Paul's age, injury history, he is a downgrade. James Harden, not really much, if I'm being honest, but during the regular season, definitely. But come playoffs, they're very similar. So I mean, if you're Philadelphia, is it better for you to get Chris Paul and, like, say, a first-round pick or something like that, as opposed to just losing James Harden for nothing? Sure. Like, if James Harden has made up his mind and he tells Philly, like, hey, either trade me to the Phoenix Suns or I'm just going to go sign with the Houston Rockets, then if you're Philly, you're like, okay, like, we might as well get some assets in return for James Harden. If you get Chris Paul, at least you get like that facilitator playmaker. So you'd still have Chris Paul, Maxey, Joel Embiid, Tucker, and Tobias Harris. So, I mean, you still have you still kind of get the same level of like setup, production, kind of maestro, orchestrator that Chris Paul is, right? The playmaking side, you definitely get. You won't get the scoring side, where James Harden can just go off for 30 every game if he has to. Where Chris Paul, he's not really that, but you have Joel Embiid, so it's like, you don't really need somebody to go and get you 30 every single night. I mean, Maxey is a guy that can go get you 20 to 25. You're going to get Joel Embiid with like 30 plus a game. You just need Chris Paul to give you like 15 a game, which is basically what he averaged this past year. He averaged like 14, 15 a game. So Chris Paul gives you 15 and 10. Joel Embiid gives you 30 and 10. And then you have like Maxey giving you 25 a game. Everyone else trickling in their, 10 points, 5 points, whatever. You'll score enough points to be good. Chris Paul is he's better defensively than James Harden right now. I mean, not by much. Chris Paul isn't the defender he once was, but he at least tries and locks down, and he did average like 2 steals a game or a steal and a half a game. So you do get that. If Chris Paul was being waived and Philly was to sign him, sure, that makes a lot of sense. But to go and trade for him, again, better to get Chris Paul than nothing, right? Because it could be worse. You could trade and go get Chris Paul, or you could go and just lose James Harden entirely. At least you get Chris Paul, who's a guy that can still play a bit, and he's a guy that can at least, you get some assets. I don't know. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for Philly outside of like, hey, we're going to lose James Harden either way, right? So might as well recoup something. But at that point, does Phoenix, do they look at it and go like, yeah, we'll give you a first and stuff? Or do they just look at it as like, we could just waive Chris Paul, trade DeAndre Ayton for peanuts, and just sign James Harden anyway? I don't know. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense for Philly. It makes sense for Phoenix. I still think it would be rough. You got to trade DeAndre Ayton at that point. Like, definitely got to trade DeAndre Ayton at that point. Because you got to get enough to build a roster. I know James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker, probably good enough to definitely win you a good amount of games. Definitely could, win the first round in a playoff series, maybe even the second round. But once you start getting into like the top teams, I just don't think that they'll have enough. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you make of this? What do you think? Do you think it happens? Do you think it doesn't? Would you be all for it? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, let me know.